My name's Will DeFries, and this is the Sunday Scaries podcast, your cure for the Sunday blues. When I look at this week's guest, Kate Kennedy, I see a lot of myself in her. We're both podcast hosts who never set out to be podcast hosts, and the steps we took to get to this point are sometimes kind of hard to describe, as you'll see through our interview. She wears a lot of hats: author, podcast host, as I said, social commenter, and even doormat mogul. The list really goes on. When my wife Sally first introduced me to Kate Kennedy, it wasn't that I didn't know what to think, but, whenever someone recommends something to you, you don't always take them seriously from the get-go. But once I started following Kate on Instagram, I knew exactly why Sally thought that she would not only be a good person for me to follow, but an even better person to have on the Sunday Scaries podcast. As you'll see from our interview, it was an hour well spent. Enjoy. Kate, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Let's just get right into it. I'm familiar with you. I know that a fair amount of my listeners are also familiar with you. But for those that aren't, you've had an interesting career path. Can you kind of give me a bird's eye view of that, and then we can dive into logistics in a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kate Kennedy. I am a podcast host of a podcast called Be There in 5, also an entrepreneur that started a namesake company called Be There in 5. And an author and kind of general pop culture commentator, if you will. And my career is kind of windy, but long story short, I accidentally started a doormat company because I was worried about burning my house down, and they went viral. Mats that said, like, turn off your straightener, turn off your curling iron. And I ended up leaving my corporate job, working in that business for a while, wrote a book, started a podcast, and it's all kind of come full circle in recent years to just, I don't know, be a multi-hyphenate, I guess, dabble in a little bit of everything. Sometimes I struggle with my inability to more narrowly define it, but I'm having fun trying different types of content and seeing kind of where my career takes me next, because I obviously didn't think doormats was going to be my big break 5 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really kind of plans for that kind of motion in their career. What were you doing before the famous doormat?
So I was at a big market research company. It's called Nielsen. They do like TV ratings. Mm-hmm. And I was a director of market research for like advertising effectiveness. So basically I helped like big CPG advertisers optimize their ad spots. And we'd like tell them how to effectively cut their 30-second spots to like 15, how many brand mentions and visuals, like which ads were performing more strongly so they could shift weight to their higher performing ads. It was actually really interesting and I really liked it. But when I quit, I was actually in a Six Sigma black belt role that I did briefly too at that company.
Interesting. And so did you want to switch careers, or was it the kind of thing that just happened and you were like, well, this could be really fun, and you decided to do it?
For the mats?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not want to switch careers. I was pretty adamant about not quitting my job for a while. It was one of those things where I just kind of tried it on a whim. Like I'm crafty, I'm artsy, and I did it on a weekend when I had nothing else going on. Actually, my then boyfriend, now husband, and I got in a fight over a smoothie. And you know how sometimes when you're like annoyed with the person you live with, you just like want to channel your energy elsewhere.
Oh yeah, like I power clean whenever we get in an argument. I just start like angrily wiping down surfaces and things like that. And it's like, what are you doing? This is not like sticking it to them.
And like moving the other person's shit.
Yeah.
So I just painted like a prototype of a mat and put it up on Etsy because some of my friends thought it was funny. And then it sat there for about a month. And then a radio station in Australia found it, made it into a meme, and it went viral overnight. And then I figured out a supply chain and a business model, and I kind of followed I'd read, the lean startup. I kind of followed the minimum viable product model of like, don't perfect it first, just like do the bare minimum, see if there's demand, then refine it from there. And that definitely was effective because I didn't have the resources. There would be no reason for me to like build up this mat operation until I actually knew people wanted them. And the beauty of social media is it gives you the ultimate focus group.
Mhm.
And so then I just kind of ramped up, and I had 2 jobs for a little over a year. And then when the business needed me, uh, there's I think a point where it becomes clear where it's no longer an option to be doing both.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I somewhat reluctantly left my corporate job to pursue it about a year in. So to answer your question, no, I wasn't planning on it, but I kind of was just rolling with the punches.
And so, I mean, a question that I tried to answer and I did not do a good job of answering was a couple weeks ago. I do a listener voicemail or a listener questions episode. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
questions was about switching your careers late in your 20s. And it was
Mm-hmm.
something that I kind of did, but didn't totally. I don't really want to say that I totally did that because it's not like I just completely like quit and just went in a totally different direction. All my skills were kind of there. It was still frightening for me. Was it scary when you had that realization that like, okay, these 2 jobs are not going to sync together very well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think anytime I think that, well, it's a couple things. One, anytime you're doing something entrepreneurial, especially, or you're starting anything new, there's like a level of ambiguity you have to be comfortable with, because you just cannot adequately predict what's going to happen with like a corporate path or a trade that has a more clear career trajectory. It's just different, and there's a level of security there that I don't even think you know you have it until it's gone.
Yeah.
And the anxiety of not really knowing how stable your income source is, of not being able to walk away and knowing that you're the only person that can do any of the work.
Mm-hmm.
I think inevitably anybody who does something new, you have to be okay with the first year or two. You're not going to be in a position to be like outsourcing and hiring. You're gonna be doing a lot of the work, and it can be intense. But I think that people get so intimidated by the idea of doing something new. But if they just start it and take it one piece at a time, people will be amazed to meet a new side of themselves. Like I if I would have never ever been able to do the business had I thought like about developing a doormat manufacturing process. I would have quit like before I even ideated anything. But when you find yourself in that situation, you figure it out. And I just always tell people, like, don't think about it as changing. Don't think about it as this huge like shift. Think about it as just start a bunch of different things, see what sticks, and listen to that and move forward with it and just see how it evolves. And if your career changes, cool. If it doesn't change, it didn't work out. But I guess the biggest thing too is I would never tell somebody to quit their job, then start something new.
Yes, that is
Start it
definitely
when you have a
something.
job.
That's definitely something that I would not recommend either. When I was going to quit my job and go off and do my own thing, she was at that point. She was just my girlfriend. She was pretty much telling me, "I don't think this is a good idea. You should never do that." My parents always kind of taught me that like before you move on to something, you should have something else kind of in the pipeline, or at least a mental plan of something to do. And
Yeah.
but being a creative person and not being somebody that wants to figure out like you said, the pipeline for manufacturing doormats. How did you take that step to going from having the creative energy that you were getting out to actually doing the logistics of the things that you were doing?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. Like when I said earlier, you meet a different side of yourself. I feel lucky to have had the experience, just in terms of you have no concept of like your potential for things you've never done. Like I always think about it whenever I'm bowling or doing some obscure sport. I'm like, what if there's some sport or activity that I'm just like naturally really good at, but I'll have never tried? And I kind of think about like entrepreneurship the same way. Like I would never ever think I'd be good at it or my skills would lend themselves to it. But I think that there's an amount of adrenaline and an intensity of how much you care about something that even if you're not great at the logistics and the operations, you have the will to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my creativity like fueled that. Even though I wasn't the smartest or the best at it and I didn't do a great job half the time, I just cared so much. And that's honestly fueled it. Like I didn't have a desire to be doing other things. I was just like obsessed with trying to make the best of the situation and do something efficient with it. But yeah, I wish I had a more tangible answer, but I just kind of like figured it out. Like I literally, my entire career, the past 5 years is just like 47 browser tabs at all times
Yeah.
open. Like I'm just researching shit. Like it's, you know, everybody thinks everybody else knows something they don't, or some sort of genius, or knows like the secrets to manufacturing, supply chains, or product, whatever, but they don't. They're people like you that just like have to figure it out.
There's something about figuring it out that feels good, because if you have the mindset that you're figuring it out so that you can do it on your own, as opposed to comparing it to being at a corporate job and sitting there and you're figuring things out for other people to succeed. It's just like, I don't want to sound selfish, but at the same time, if you're not fully invested in your other job, you find that motivation elsewhere once you start going off on your own and realizing that like it's kind of you or nobody. You also said that doormats aren't your passion. I saw this on a TikTok that you posted recently. Congratulations on entering TikTok, by the way. But what is your passion?
Oh, thank you. It is TikTok.
Yeah.
It's well, okay. When I say doormats aren't my passion, my train of thought there is more so to encourage people to kind of step away from the vessel or the content or the end product of what something is that is a passion, and to think more about the individual tasks that like allow you to work passionately towards something.
Yeah.
And I wasn't passionate about market research data, but I loved 15 different small components that made up my day, that made me passionate about that role. And I'm certainly not passionate about doormats, but so many elements of the, entrepreneurial venture, the creativity, the working with your hands, the close relationship with customers. There were so many things that I loved about running the business at first that I was passionate about that had nothing to do with what I was making. And I just think the less you focus on the end product and more about what the actual job is, the better off you are, because like the concept of passion is intimidating. And if you don't have this one great source of joy in your life, you almost feel like you're lacking something, but it's not true. It probably means you can get joy out of so many things.
Mm-hmm. That's a very optimistic way of looking at it. I recently went through a small period of time where I was beating myself up because I wanted to find another passion. I wanted to find a hobby that inspired me and made me happy, because I kind of turned my hobby into my full-time job. And while I still love my full-time job, I don't feel like I have anything on the outside that I do that's just specific to my happiness and not something that is contributing to my career. And someone told me, she said to me, when something like that comes to you, you will know. And so don't put pressure on yourself to do that now. And I took a step back and I was like, man, she's kind of just telling me to like lethargically go about this. And I don't really hate that process right now.
I wholeheartedly agree with a lethargic approach. Just in terms of when you get creative flow, when you're interested in something, do it, try it, see what comes of it. And I think more often than not, like, I don't know, I find that like I just never really know what's going to be the thing that makes me lose track of time. And I pay attention to things that make me lose track of time, because that means I'm entranced and I'm into it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like always my barometer for like pursuing new things. But I'm with you. It's actually quite hard for me to pursue anything and not think about like how to monetize it or make it a part of my job, just so I'm not like wasting time.
Yeah.
It's kind of tricky.
It's kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, everything I do kind of just funnels through work because I've just, completely entrenched myself in it. You have a philosophy, and you kind of touched on it earlier, and it's a philosophy that I've always held when it comes to doing my own thing. And it has to do with having a very small amount of overhead. How important was that to you starting off as an entrepreneur, and what kind of steps did you take in order to make sure that you didn't have a ton of overhead and you weren't having these sunken costs?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing it's so intuitive that you have to remember is that you can care as much as you want about your product, and your family and your immediate reference group can think it's great. It doesn't matter unless there's demand from the customer. And it's impossible to create a perfect product in the absence of a customer's opinion. And I think a lot of people get really bottlenecked at the onset, trying to make something that's holds up against their standards that they're going to inevitably have to change, because you just can't know how the market's going to react. So in general, I agree with you. Like, as lean as possible up front is really the only way to be able to kind of start in a way that doesn't have the pressure of immense investment and overhead. Because in general too, I think there's something to things work out better when you don't need them to.
Mm-hmm.
And when you sink a ton of money, resources, time into something and then have to change it, it's of course going to affect the success and trajectory. And I think people like get excited and spend a lot and want an office and want like all these things to like live an entrepreneurial life, when I'd argue most legitimate entrepreneurs like are like so entranced in the work, they're, and like on the floor in the closet doing whatever they need to get some quiet time just to figure it out, and aren't as concerned with like the optics. And I think that's a big place people spend too much too.
Mm-hmm. When you started your podcast, you noted that it took about a year to get off the ground. When I started Sunday Scaries, I started it probably 7 years ago now, and I pretty much was just blogging. Like I was just putting up posts a few times a week. It took over a year and a half before I started looking at like Google Analytics and being like, okay, people are actually kind of reading this. And even then, looking at the traffic, it was nothing crazy. I mean, it was like 200 people would read one article, but going from 5 people reading it to 200 people reading it was a really big deal. How did you stay motivated through that entire process to make sure that, you were heading in the right direction and you were doing the right thing?
I think like I always wish I had advice that would bring people any sort of like, peace as it relates to growth. And if they're feeling like growth is slow, but the reality is it is consistent effort over a long period of time. And it's a slow burn. Mm-hmm. If you're not already famous, if you're not already on some bigger platform. And to your point about going from 5 to 200, like those are wins. That is a big deal. And growing an organic audience is impossible. And to be a random person that other people are committing to spending their time and care about your input and opinions is a really incredible thing. And I think people trivialize it in the face of, huge influencers that have a totally different starting point than they do. So the biggest thing to me is like, you can't compare to anybody else. You're just not in the same situation. And I don't know, it never did any good for me. But other than that, I like for a podcast, there's really only 2 ways you grow it. Your listeners share it or you guest on other people's. Mm-hmm. And I think that is when I started to have guests and got guests that my listeners liked and was guesting on other people's podcasts, that's when the growth like really happened. I'd love to say it was something I did, but honestly, it's just an exposure and a reach game and, attracting and repelling the right people.
It's a grind. I mean, I'm sure you know that. It's just a grind, and you kind of noted that before. It's just very difficult to consistently do something with very little return, only to, when it finally pays off, it's like the greatest thing in the world. But yeah, mm-hmm. with so little return, it's just difficult. You do a lot of social commentary on your Instagram. That's how my wife found you. That's how she started, funneling you to me, and that's how I started following you. You have fun while you're doing it. What has been some of the most fun stuff you've done on Instagram that has gotten some great feedback from listeners or just followers?
I have a really good time crowdsourcing stuff and like responding to it. Like I'll do question and answer sometimes, but I love using the question box to get people's input on things. Mm-hmm. And I'm like obsessed with data. I'm market research background. Like I just am always trying to kind of leverage them as a way to understand what people care about and what I can podcast about. But I mean, there's so many, like there was one that we did of like blind spots of like, things you went your entire life, like up until adulthood, and you found out something you've been saying for years is like wildly incorrect. Like people thinking the word misled is pronounced missled. Or like we called them blind spots. But even like today or yesterday, I realized that a lot of I started getting messages that people didn't know what my podcast logo was, like what it was an image of. And so then I asked people, I'm like, well, what did you guys think it was? And the answers I got back were hilarious, alarming. And I don't know whether to laugh or cry at my graphic design skills, because people were like, oh, I thought it was a 5 up in flames, like Ed Hardy vibes. I'm like, yes, that is my brand. Like, what?
Yeah, it's like, huh?
Why would you think I'd have that?
I know. My original Sunday Scaries logo, someone pointed, this is about probably 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years after the fact. they pointed out that it looked exactly like the Goldman Sachs logo. And I was like, well, that is the complete opposite of a company that I want my logo to look like. And it's not like I looked at them like, oh, that's a great logo. It's like, why would I care what the Goldman Sachs logo looks like?
Just a small, yeah, innovative company. I feel like those oversights are tricky though, because your eyes get so used to something, you don't even think about it critically anymore. And I've had this logo for 2.5 years. And nobody has ever told me that they thought it looked like a Swiss Army knife or like, you know, a garden. Like somebody said it looked like a dying garden. I'm like, you honestly think I would ideate my logo and be like garden, but make it dead?
Yeah,
Like,
kill this garden, and then I'm going to use that as my entire brand when it comes to like podcast world. You got some pretty dedicated fans. Do you have any like interactions or things that you like to do with your fans to kind of keep them engaged?
I have a private Facebook group that I love that is incredibly engaged. There's like 80,000 posts and comments a month. It's like the stats are kind of crazy despite it not being like the biggest group.
Yeah.
But I also am kind of crazy about making sure like people answer questions and they actually listen to the podcast to get in. I started doing live shows late last year. And I think that was, I don't know about you, like with meeting, you know, interacting people, but like, it just never came to life for me until I saw people in person reacting to me talk. When you talk to a mic all the time, you never see people react to you. And comments or feedback DMs, it's just not the same thing as seeing somebody, their face, like laugh or be engaged or care. And doing live shows re-energized me in a way I was like never prepared for, that I miss now, obviously, that we can't do them. But that interaction, like at meet and greets and stuff, and like going out for drinks after, has been like the biggest joy, because I really am meeting people that are so much like me. And like over the course of 2 years somehow found me, and I am not for everybody. My podcast is kind of it's broad, but it's long, and it's like a solo monologue, and it's just not, I've had trouble finding the right people, but when I actually meet them, I'm like, it's wild how similar we are and that they found me.
It's fun. We kind of have the same thing. On Circling Back, my other podcast, we started doing listener meetups. And this was something that we started a while ago, but we didn't really ramp them up until more recently. And it wasn't until the last year where we would, you know, go to a bar, and we would never rent bars out or anything like that. It'd just be like, all right, everyone show up. And then one of them lasted for 9 hours instead of the 2 hours that we originally planned. And it was like, okay, this is a serious thing. But it is gratifying, and it is validating to go to those sorts of events and, you know, have people psyched about what you're doing and get that real life feedback. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just think, like, to your point earlier about how at times you feel like you're just talking to an audience of zero, and when you're committed to the consistency and like nobody's out there and it's moving so slowly, I think those interactions are crucial, because even if it's like meaningful and you're contributing to like a handful of people and they tell you about it, it just propels you to keep going. And I think I was almost like, I don't know how to explain it. I was hesitant to do like a meetup because I felt like it's just me. If I had like a co-host, it'd be different, but to be like, hey, come meet me. I felt a little weird.
Yeah, I don't think that if I wasn't with the other guys, I don't think there's any way that I could have ever set something up like that without some kind of like shtick behind it. It would have to be some sort of event that was for something else that I just happened to be at in order to interact with people. It's like, it's scary to put yourself out there when you're not, I'm not naturally an extrovert. I'm not an introvert necessarily, but I don't really like, when I first meet people, I don't really jump into conversation with them. I kind of slow play it, get a vibe for what they're doing. And so, yeah, it's just kind of, it's difficult to put yourself in those situations. So I applaud you for being able to do that.
Barely. But once I ripped off the Band-Aid, I was like, oh, this is great. But, you know, I think I'm an introvert too. It's human nature to assume nobody's going to come to your party, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's always the fear at like 10 minutes before. It's like, all right, no one's here. And then it's time and you're like, oh, everyone's fashionably late. How scared were you before your first live show?
Oh my gosh, terrified. Talking on stage is not the same as talking into a mic. I had done a lot of public speaking in my job, and like I think I'm a better public speaker than I am like even a small talker. But I didn't prepare. Like I was kind of going to shoot the shits because I wanted it to be like a podcast, but I realized you kind of do have to be prepared. And you almost have to have like a set.
Yeah.
And I had more of that when I did the other shows. But the first one was fun because it was local people and they were really supportive and they knew I was nervous. And, but I like, it's a miracle I even went because I was like about to pass out. I don't know why I was so scared. But I think it's like people listen to you and they're into you. Can you imagine them being disappointed in person? Like that's so awful to me to think about.
Yeah. I mean, that would just be awful. It's like you walk out of there for the meet and greet after and you're just like, everyone's just kind of like bored. It's like, oh no. Yeah. It sounds a little frightening.
I know. Disappointing people is like my biggest fear in doing that. So yeah, I think you just have to, at the very least, have fun and other people will have fun.
Yeah. I mean, so it sounds like you definitely feed off other people. How has quarantine treated you throughout this entire process?
It's not that vastly different from like my work life. I have worked from home for 5 years and I am definitely an introvert and I definitely don't need to be doing that much. But yeah, I think like for anybody, it's incredibly daunting to not have the option. And my husband's here working and it is interesting having, because I'm like, I feel like someone's in my office, even though it's my house.
Yes.
And we're kind of having to like work, or we live in an apartment. So it's like who's on calls when or recording when. And that's been interesting. But in general, I just like, I think we all need things to look forward to. And it's just difficult when you have no one to look to for answers. The ambiguity can get the best of you some days, but other days I'm energized by it and I'm able to create stuff. It just like totally depends.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had a creative rut, if I'm being honest, over the past like 3 weeks. And it's been, I mean, I feel like my mind is racing about so much stuff on the outside that it's hard for me to kind of channel it when I'm working from home, which I'm kind of like you. I work from home a lot and I'm used to it. And I'm very good at being a homebody. But just like you, I mean, I have Sally around and she will ask me a question in the middle of my work. And I look at her, I'm like, why would you ask me that right now? I'm intentionally thinking about something. And she looks at me like, why are you being a jerk right now? I mean, it does feel like someone's
being interrupted.
I know. It's like, I mean, she's a doctor and, you know, she doesn't understand what it's like to be sitting at home just working. And I feel like almost guilty.
And especially when your job doesn't look like your spouse's job, and half the time I'm working, it does not look like I'm working. But to your point about creative rut, like it takes me. I wish so badly I could manufacture that creative flow, or like kind of athletes being in the zone, but for your brain, because when it happens, it's magical. You get more done in 20 minutes than you will in 2 weeks. But yeah, if somebody breaks that and I'm in the zone, I'm irrational about having my focus broken. So I certainly can relate to that.
Yeah, my noise canceling headphones broke about 2 days into quarantine, I'd say. And I was like, well, great. Now I have a big expense in front of me. And I also don't have noise canceling headphones when there's someone else around our apartment the entire time. So I was just going crazy.
Well, and the other piece too about the creativity, it's like, I mean, you talk for a living, like so much of providing content for other people is like living life. We're like not living life. So half the time I'm like, I have nothing to say because I'm not stimulated. Like I'm not out there. Like I don't even know what I need, but it's just like, you're really having to kind of manufacture your interest in things out of thin air in your home.
Yeah. Yeah, you absolutely do. And I almost feel guilty sometimes making light of certain things, even if they aren't related to the pandemic itself. I just kind of feel guilty, like, cackling at jokes and stuff with the co-hosts when, there's people out there who are just having a terrible time. But then I try to always tell myself, people are trying to escape from everyday life when they're listening to a podcast. They're wanting to distract themselves. They're wanting to learn something. They're just wanting to do something outside of, focus on what they're focusing on. I mean, have you had any experience with that in that mindset?
Yeah, I think that's always a really fascinating line to toe as it relates to the pandemic or any like political or economic climate as something that's going on, especially with social media. It's like, you need to acknowledge it. But if you're not the subject matter expert or the best person to go to, do you need to be talking about it excessively? And is you talking about it serving other people, or is it serving you because you don't want to look bad?
Yeah.
And so I kind of take a step back and I'm like, okay, how can I add value in this serious situation? And if I can, great. And if I can't, I kind of just focus on being more of the escape. And with like COVID-19, I just think that the tension is so high, and I don't have new news, and I can't really provide any comfort. So at the very least, I can make you forget about it for a little while. And that's kind of what my strategy has been, while simultaneously like acknowledging it and trying to like promote ways to help and whatnot. But I'm with you. The Quarren memes and stuff, it's just like people really like took this as an opportunity for comedy.
I took
kind of a lot.
The second it started happening, I was like, okay, well, I have an Instagram account with this many followers. How can I do something that doesn't poke fun at what's going on, but also acknowledges it? And so I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to try to give humorous takes on things that people should be doing, because I did want to preach to people. I kind of thought it was a waste of time if I was still posting stuff from this reasonably big account and I wasn't helping people. And so I was just trying to encourage, stay home, wash your hands, do this, do that. And yeah, I don't know. I think that there is a line that you have to toe with this stuff. And so I think what you said is pretty on point.
Wait, can I tell you what happened to me, speaking about COVID on my social media? So one day, 2 weeks ago, I did an Insta story where I was talking about this big story with an influencer who had COVID-19, didn't self-isolate, went to the Hamptons to like a rental house, was around her kids, nanny, husband.
Is this the mom?
Handled it poorly. Yeah, her name's Ariel.
Yes.
And like those situations infuriate me, because it's one thing to make the poor ethical decision. It's another thing to share it with millions of people as if that's okay.
Yes.
And I agree with you. I was kind of being preachy about staying home too, because like, why the hell not? People need to hear it. And there's no harm in frequency of hearing it from a lot of people. But I said like maybe I did like 5 slides or videos about Ariel. 2 days later, it gets picked up by the New York Times as a formal quote on the situation, and they never contacted me.
That's a little intimidating.
Well, I only say that because I had no idea something I said in a disappearing Insta story could be used as a quote, as genuine like commentary on something I'm not an expert in. Like, it kind of was a huge lesson to me. And when I do comment on those things, you have to think about your words like colloquially, casually spoken in print.
Yes. And like, you also have to worry. I mean, in the beginning, when you don't have as big of an audience, it's kind of like, you know what, I can say whatever. I can say exactly what's on my mind. And if it doesn't play well, then it's not a big deal. But then you get to the point where it's like, okay, there's actually more people than I ever imagined would be listening or, reading along. And you do have to be careful with how you phrase those things. And so, yeah, when it comes to coronavirus, I've just done my best to not even talk about the logistics of, what's actually going on, because no one wants to hear that from me.
Right. I know. Same. I'm kind of like, if you're coming to me for that, you've got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
Like, please find better sources.
It's like, I'm not telling you to turn on the news, but I mean, just find somewhere to go look at stuff. I have one website that I go to, and it's just our local one, and I go to that, and then everything else I just get from, the repetitiveness of just hearing it from different sources everywhere.
Right. Wait, where do you live?
Austin, Texas.
Oh, nice.
Yep. You're in Chicago, correct?
I am, yeah.
Yep. Same time zone, but much different scenarios right now.
Yes.
Do you want to jump into some Sunday questions?
Yeah.
All right, let's do some traditional Sunday Scaries questions. I ask some of these to most of our guests, but I always kind of try to take some out and put some in. The first one, what's your ideal Sunday outfit?
Ooh, my ideal Sunday outfit. Honestly, what I'm wearing right now, I wear a lot of black turtlenecks. I'm always dressed like I could give a keynote.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very comfortable in like a black turtleneck and jeans. That's kind of, that's a funny coronavirus thing. I was getting so much flack for wearing jeans, but I like to wear clothes when I'm working, even if I'm in my house.
It's motivating.
So Yeah, I actually on Sundays I'm probably like wearing a proper like jean.
Oh, I'm impressed. Yeah, I've also been wearing a lot of black lately. I don't know why. Maybe because I feel like it's slimming on me and I need that right now. But people always make fun of me for trying to be like Steve Jobs or something. And I like that. I'm glad that you are also wearing black on this, because before I put this shirt on, I was like, well, we are recording this for video. I'm not really sure if like black will play, but you validated me.
Black's always the best for recording, I think.
Do you drink coffee? And if so, how do you take your coffee?
Yes, I drink so much coffee and I put like sweet creamer in it. There's this like I don't know who makes it. It's called Sweet Cream though, and it's like the best creamer in the entire world. I think it's Coffee Mate, but yeah. But that's it. I just use my Nespresso.
Pretty straightforward. How do you take your
Yeah.
eggs?
I recently got into the Gordon Ramsay method. Have you ever done that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's pretty much all
Yeah.
I do now.
Yeah, it's hard some days not having, cash creme fraiche lying around, but you can substitute with sour cream.
You
You
can
can get
figure it out.
creative.
Yeah.
I cook them a little bit more than he does. They're a little liquidy for me, but yeah, scrambled all the way.
What would I find in your refrigerator right now?
You would find a bunch of condiments and a HelloFresh meal because I've gotten back into meal subscriptions. I hated them for a while because it's just so much chopping. Like, why am I pickling stuff? Why am I making a chutney? I just want to eat.
Yeah.
But that's something that I found like some peace in during this time. Like, it's the only time of the day I can like zone out because I have to focus so hard on like chopping because I'm not a cook. I'm not a good cook at all. So I've been making a lot of those meals, which has been nice.
We've been cooking so much more. We already kind of cooked a decent amount, but we've been cooking so much more. And it is a very good way to just transition from like, sometimes it's hard to get out of your work from home mindset. And just cooking dinner and having a
Yeah,
hard stop and pouring a drink has just been our nightly routine. And it's not that big of a departure from our regular routine, but it definitely helps.
it does. Otherwise, I'll just graze.
It's snacking and like drinking have been two things where I'm like, all right, you need to do as little of that as possible throughout this, but easier said than
I
done.
could not physically be drinking more wine just because I have nothing else to do. And I'm like, I don't need to be, it's like mindless.
Yes, like we have a wine rack above our refrigerator, and we stocked it up right before they said like they closed non-essential businesses. And I thought, oh, we're never going to get through this. And then just this weekend, I looked over and I was like, do we need to go to the liquor store? I was like, I can't believe I'm asking this, but we've just been drinking bottles of wine like they're going out of style.
I know, same.
It's easy.
I'm interested to see how we all adjust following this. Like, because I think we're all now kind of in a different routine that we're now going to have to break.
I'm worried that I'm going to have trouble breaking my routine, and I'm worried that I'm going to be really lazy. I'm worried that I'm not going to want to go out to dinners with people or go do things outside of my normal now routine that I've like kind of settled into.
Yeah, I'm kind of nesting too. I hit acceptance like maybe mid last week. Before that, it was a bit rough, but now I'm accepting where we are and accepting that I don't know when it will be over.
I didn't realize it last week, but I was in the anger phase last week, and I didn't realize it.
Mm.
But once I looked back on the week and saw how I was like talking to people and just like treating my life and like treating my everyday tasks, I was like, man, the quarantine really turned you into kind of a jerk for a week. So I'm trying to be much more positive this week and going forward. Next question: who are your favorite Instagram follows right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. Wait, should I just look at who's at the? I always look at like who are the top people. Well, it's
I
so funny. It's 14 rows of lives.
I know. I always look at whenever I look at my thing, I always know like who I'm checking the most, just because I figure Instagram puts their stories like right in the first part of, or right when you open the app, they're just right there.
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm kind of loving the Instagram lives. People are hard on them, but I'm like, let people go live. Let people entertain the people.
You don't have to
The more
watch.
content, the better. Exactly. But I think people are off put because they get pulled, one rogue accidental click of a notification. You're the only one in the lobby of somebody's live and it's
It's
uncomfortable.
just a FaceTime where you can't talk to them outside of just like commenting, and then you're like, oh, why am I here? This is weird.
Yes. And I feel bad leaving. I'm like, I don't want to. Crushed dreams.
I did this like a
I
few
want
months
them to
ago.
not have
I
anybody
entered
else in here.
someone's live, and I was like, "Oh, this will be fun." And then I was the only person there, and I felt so guilty not leaving that I think I was the only person there for about 20 minutes before they finally stopped it. I was like, I can't be the reason that they end their live. That's just sad.
That's amazing. I would do the same thing. So I've been trying to be better about, this word sounds condescending, but it's not, because I'm one, like following and kind of promoting micro influencers. I think the best influencers have like under 50,000 followers and work their asses off because they have incentive to,
Yeah.
and they're creating so much value. So like there's a couple different people, but like one is, her handles What Kate Finds, and she did like scheduled lives with certain people every day and like put out a content calendar and just did a really good job of like organizing what she was going to talk about and when. And she did like manicure boot camps because none of us can get our nails done. I appreciate the organization and the effort. I love effort.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of influencers get to a 0F swipe up place in their life where they're just not having it. But yeah, she's a person I love. I mean, Heather McMahon, so entertaining during the quarantine. There's a blogger named Kathleen Barnes, who I think is really good at what she does. It's a time when people are being hypercritical on influencers, and I think there's some that are really doing a good job. And I'm still having fun following, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, credit to all those people out there who are doing those things and going live and everything. I know that there is a stigma, and people kind of are down talking how like, oh, everyone's going live all the time. But at the same time, you know, those people are, their entire, you know, career routine right now is kind of up in the air and just kind of out there. And so I respect the hell out of people that are doing all this grinding right now.
Same. And I'm sure you've experienced this too, but like nothing drives me crazier than people being like, everyone has a podcast.
Oh,
I'm like, everyone else having a podcast in no way affects mine.
no. And like when people say that, I'm like, all right, why don't you have one? How's yours going? Like, I'm just like, why is this a thing? Like, there's TV shows out there. There's a million TV shows out there, but not everyone has a TV show.
Right. Exactly. Just because there's a high volume of something doesn't mean it's easy. And I think the podcast network's kind of popping up everywhere that we're actively pursuing anybody with a platform being like, you should podcast. Entire cast of Vanderpump Rules. Yeah. You need to be heard. But really, it's a play for ad revenue. But like, I don't need to listen to shenanigans, but I support her. Like, it's fine. So I do think it's made the space more cluttered, but I almost feel like when people say that, it's intended to be condescending, and it drives me nuts. I mean, when you first start, like when people ask you randomly, like, oh, so what do you do? I mean, Uber drivers. And then I tell them, I'm like, oh, I host a podcast. And I'm like, oh, they think I'm a total dweeb right now. Oh, I never tell the truth. I'm always like, I'm in ad sales. Yeah. See, I need to have a more canned answer so I don't have to explain at length, like what I do and how it all works. Cause I feel like such a tool. I do too. And nothing gives me more anxiety than the wrong person trying to introduce themselves to my content. Like somebody like my uncle or like somebody who just doesn't get it and isn't in my target market. And then they hear or watch something that is so not meant for them. They almost feel bad for me. Yeah. Like I'm creating, yeah. Like, oh, that's cute that she's talking about Taylor Swift so much. Nobody cares, but like, you don't care. But so I actually am kind of funny about sharing what I do to avoid those de-energizing conversations where I'm having to over-explain, because I don't need to sell somebody who's not in my target market on why they should be, validate my career. Like, I'm fine. That's such a good point. I always get nervous. There's sometimes when we do a segment or I'll do a, whether it's like a maybe kind of more out there, like outrageous segment, or maybe it's something heartfelt. And I'm like, oh, I just think instead of thinking about the people that could, get something out of it, instead, I always think about the people that are sitting there like critiquing me and being like mean behind closed doors. I just have to get out of that. I've started listening to those feelings though, of that like kind of nauseous discomfort of like this, where you're like, this is awful, or this is too much or too intense, or this is a risk. That's always when you're doing something right though. And And that's kind of like the true definition of vulnerability. If vulnerability isn't doing something with a known outcome, it's doing something despite there definitely being somewhat of a negative outcome.
Yeah.
And I'm with you on that. It's kind of a lot to constantly be putting stuff out there, not always be hearing back, and you just kind of, I don't know, I mull over these things, everything I've ever said and done in my weaker moments.
I know. I don't know. We have a very active listener base across all of our podcasts, and I'm so glad that we do, because if we mess up, we are told immediately. If we do something really well, then, we can pat ourselves on the back. But if we didn't have a vocal audience, I don't know how we would do some of the things we do. We just would have no clue where to go.
How do you get that steady stream of feedback?
We get it everywhere. Reddit is like a huge one for us. We have a lot of people that post in the Reddit, and they'll either weigh in on a topic that we have. They will, sometimes they can get complainy sometimes, but at the same time, I'm glad they're invested enough to care and to go on there and say something. But Reddit is a very big source for us, and having that community going is difficult sometimes, but it's also like one of the best ways that we grow. And so it's been great. Now I kind of want a private Facebook group like you, but I never log into Facebook anymore, unfortunately. I need to start doing that more.
Groups are running Facebook. I can't recommend it enough.
I'm in like 2 groups, and one of them's like a Frasier meme group, and I get like 40 notifications a day. I've like turned off notifications for it, and no matter what, I still get them. And I think they're so funny that I don't want to leave, even though I'm getting all these notifications. So it's just kind of double-edged sword.
I find comfort in the lack of anonymity that comes with Facebook. Reddit is a little touch and go for me, because it gets pretty snarky in the fields where I operate. And I'm just too sensitive of a person for it. And I think people are quite bold. But in Facebook groups, when their name's attached to it, there's a little bit more. Do I need the raw feedback? Sure. Do I appreciate the added discretion that comes with your name being attached to it? Yes.
Yeah, I get that. Here's a question, and this might be a scary question. It was scary the first time someone asked me and grabbed my phone and showed me how to look at it. What's your weekly screen time looking like?
Oh my God, it's abysmal.
It's
the other piece of this too is like part of my job is being on Instagram. And I'm always trying to explain this to my husband, like being a part of people's day. And I always wish I could like kind of carve out what am I working and what am I mindlessly doing,
I wish there was a button on your phone where you could say like, this is work, please don't register this. Yeah. I have to be doing this right now, and I can't use it as an excuse later, like, oh, I was working. But my screen time's up 25% since the quarantine happened.
Wait, what is yours?
Mine's actually not terrible. I mean, I say not terrible. Some people would like die thinking about it. Currently, for the last week, darn it, open. For the last week, mine has been, why isn't this working? Here we go. Daily average last week was 3 hours and 26 minutes.
Oh my God, that's nothing.
That's actually down a lot from the week before. I think I've been trying to leave my phone upside down on my bedside table at night more this past week than I have any other time.
Well, the problem with mine too, mine is at 8 hours, but I am constantly using my hotspot. Oh. My Wi-Fi is bad, so I use my hotspot for internet the entire day.
Yeah.
And I leave my phone like on and open. So I need to figure out if it's calculating that, because I'm like, I don't even have 8 hours to be like, unless TikTok really is the time suck people say it is. I don't think I've been doing that.
I read a book about how to spend less time on your phone, and it immediately cut off about 2 to 3 hours of my screen time, even when I wasn't even trying to be on my phone less. Just like reading the book just made me feel guilty, and it eventually got ingrained in me.
It's interesting. Well, yeah. And I also like my screen time on Sunday was astronomical, but I was also listening to an audiobook. So does that count?
No, I mean, that stuff, I put it in quotes, counts, but it doesn't really count. If I'm like I never look at travel days, because if I'm on a plane, there's 100% chance I'm watching a movie on my phone. And if I'm doing that means that I'm immediately going to have about 4 hours of screen time just right there. You can't put too much weight with those things.
I clocked 8 hours listening to thought leader Jessica Simpson's memoir on Sunday.
I mean, that's not a bad way to spend a Sunday. This might be a good follow-up question. Maybe it's Jessica Simpson. What are your coping mechanisms and what kind of things relax you?
I like things that are kind of mindless and educational. Like I'm not the I don't know, like the past year or so, I've really started not liking watching TV, and I kind of like doing things that are semi-educational, or at least I feel less guilty doing. Um, I love to play like this. That's so stupid. It's this game called Geoguessr. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not. Please explain because I like the sounds of it
Um,
already.
it's not something I do like every day, but this is an example of like the type of thing that I like. The it basically it drops you on a random spot anywhere on Google that Google Earth tracks, and it drops you in a street view,
Hmm.
and you using your surroundings have to figure out where you are.
That's
And I have learned so much from like like looking at trash cans and license plates and municipal buildings, and like it's amazing what you can deduce from like walking around when there's literally nothing but you see something on a curb. um I really enjoy it, and my you can play two players. My husband and I will play, and you start to like notice different differences in like Eastern European languages and stuff. It's kind of funny. So yeah, that's a great game, and I say that because that's a good way to kill time during quarantine that I would highly recommend. But in general, I kind of decompress by like reading stuff. Like I live for a deep scroll in Reddit. I love like a lot of the stuff ways I decompress are unfortunately on my phone, but I feel like it's so incredible how much information we have access to all the time, and I am just so curious that I am just always trying to learn more or find my next passion or something.
yeah.
That helps me relax weirdly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely playing GeoGuessr this weekend, so I'm
Yeah,
on
let me know
board.
what you think.
Yeah. Uh, what's on your bedside table?
A lamp, a Britney Spears piece of me, a concert cup that I put water in at night,
Love it.
and my glasses, basically.
It's a straightforward bedside table. I'm
Pretty straightforward. I like it to be uncluttered.
yeah, I hate having anything. Like we have been on a multi-month search for new bedside tables because we are so tired of the clutter that ends up and like sitting there that we were like, all right, we need new bedside tables with the biggest drawers that we can find. And we have yet to find any,
That's
so
so funny. I said that this morning. I was like, I want a piece of furniture next to me. Like, I don't want this like dinky stand. I just like, yeah, trash. I want something that I'll take care of and that I can organize.
yeah, I need something that I can actually just like take stuff and shove it into that drawer and just be like, okay, it's clean in here now. I mean, I know that drawer will be a nightmare, but at the end of the day, like it's better than having a bunch of crap next to me while I'm trying to sleep.
I also keep candy in my nightstand. Like I like being able to roll over and like have a sour bright crawler if need be.
I hate that you just told me that because like at night, one of the things that gets me like out of bed is standing up to go like get a peanut butter cup out of the freezer or something. Now
Yeah,
knowing
just one.
knowing that other people are like storing candy in their bedside tables is a dangerous game for me to play. The
Oh,
final
it's the
question.
best.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
like
sounds good. Final question. What does your ideal Sunday consist of?
my ideal Sunday consists of me sleeping a little bit, not too much where I feel badly. So I'm up by like 9.
Hmm.
Uh I on Sundays I always clean first thing, like especially during quarantine. I just feel like my life is a series of doing dishes. Um
Are you running the
so I like to
dishwasher
have
like an extreme amount right now?
a concerning amount for two people and a dog. It's like I have no memory of using 12 mugs
Yeah, who
in
are
a
using
48-hour period, but I
who's
do.
using all these glasses that I'm like constantly putting away?
Agree. It's like we're getting to the point where I like almost want to create like a system and like see who's guilty, even though there's only two of us, and I just something doesn't seem right.
It's so weird. It's like, all right, let's run it before dinner so that we can put the dishes from dinner in there since they won't fit in it. It's like, how did we get to this point where we're using this much stuff?
Right.
It's okay
No,
though.
totally. though that's like big for like the dish and like counter clutter like bothers me. So if I want to be productive on a Sunday, I'll clean everything out, and like walk the dog and just kind of like chill. My husband and I's thing is we have steak Sundays. He makes me a steak.
Sounds pretty good.
And then we watch like 90 Day Fiance, and we're both busy. It's one of the few times we like actually sit down, and I always will look forward to steak. And oddly, Sundays are kind of big work days for me because I'm self-employed, and I work for me isn't as daunting as other people. It's like fun, and I'll give myself a little bit more grace on Sundays to maybe try something new.
You're talking to the
But
perfect person who has made Sunday into a work day.
I love a Sunday work day. I wasn't sure if that was going to be unpopular with your audience.
I mean,
who's trying to decompress.
I know when I started Sunday Scaries, I was like, man, I hate Sundays. And then all of a sudden I'm like, well, I don't hate them anymore, but because now I work on them, but I feel very, motivated every single Sunday because I'm doing something. I just feel like the productivity, even if it's minimal, is still something that I can hang my hat on when I go to bed that night and not feel guilty going into the week.
Yeah, it's this unique day that is, it's like I kind of see it as, what's the word, like not free period, but it's like the construct is there of a work day without the pressure of a normal work day. So I feel more creative and open during it, and use the time a lot differently, and never feel badly about it. And I just feel like Sundays are, I don't know, I actually love them because they are like full of possibility. Because I let myself do things I don't normally otherwise work on as much. And I record a ton on Sundays. But yeah, it's funny because, yeah, the days of the week are definitely different for self-employed people.
I said that was the final question, but I have to ask one more just based on you saying something about 90 Day Fiance.
Yeah.
What are some of your top, I say this endearingly, what are some of your trash TV recommendations?
Oh yeah, I would never. I mean, I am in the garbage as it relates to reality TV. I love. I mean, I love Bravo in general, Housewives specifically, New York and Beverly Hills. I love Vanderpump Rules, Summer House, like The Usual Suspects. But I actually think that Bravo is taking a back seat to like TLC and shows like 90 Day Fiance and Married at First Sight that are these incredibly extreme situations, and have the most fascinating people coming on that aren't aspirational necessarily. It's kind of a different type of reality star, but they're such brilliant shows that like just get you sucked in. And I think those are two big standout ones. And Love is Blind on Netflix, I thought was really good recently too. That was kind of another romantic experiment. But I mean, there's just nothing like trying to get into the psyche of a person who does not know they're being conned by their internet boyfriend or girlfriend that they're paying money to and they haven't seen in 7 years.
Well, as in our household, we've been watching about 3 to 4 hours of Love Island every night before bed lately. So we are deeply entrenched. Well, if you need any recommendations, you know where to go. I've got them all for you. We've gotten too deep into Love Island at this point that it's becoming like borderline obsession. So hopefully we can remedy that.
Oh, that's exciting. I'm always looking for a lengthy series.
Well,
that I haven't seen. I'm saving Game of Thrones for like a small surgery.
I know. I still haven't seen it either. And Sally keeps saying to me like, should we start Game of Thrones over quarantine? I'm like, I'm not ready for it yet. Yeah, I feel like a surgery or something would be a good time to start it.
And you'd be so annoying to everybody on the podcast because you'd be like, the Red Wedding. Like, am I right? Let's talk about it.
How crazy was that? If somebody wants to get in your world, follow along, subscribe to your podcast. This is your moment to tell them exactly where to go and what to do.
Yeah. My dog's snoring. My gosh. You can follow me on Instagram at Be There in 5, Five, not the number 5. My podcast is also called Be There in 5. My book is Twinkle Twinkle Social Media Star. It's a parody children's book about like if nursery rhyme characters had Instagram. That came out last year. And do I have anything else I want to plug? I don't know. I'm around. Just find me on Instagram.
That works. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend some time with me. I really appreciated it. And I think I got some good tidbits out of this that I can apply to my life now as well. So success.
Oh, I hope so. No, this is so fun. Thanks for reaching out. You'll have to come on mine sometime. I love your show, and there's a ton of fans of your show in my Facebook group that told me about you guys. And yeah, this is a blast. Thanks again.
Of course, that's the highest of compliments. If you liked what you heard today, make sure to subscribe, review, or tell a friend in need about this podcast. By subscribing, you guarantee that each and every episode gets delivered directly to your phone every Sunday morning. You can also follow along on Twitter at Sunday Scaries and Instagram, which is at Sunday.Scaries, or you can follow me on both Twitter and Instagram at WillDeFreeze. And remember, stay home, wash your hands, and keep a friendly distance. See you next Sunday.